Hello and welcome to Higgscast Playing God. Tonight, we're talking about setting up for a campaign and things like who to choose for your game, the physical materials you'll need, and where to host it. There's more to this than it seems, which is why we're discussing it tonight. With me, as always, is Jesse D. Cromines
Hi, hello.
and Xander Nolan.
Hey guys.
So what do you guys want to start with? Any topic immediately
Uh,
strikes you?
let's talk about where. I think that is most important. Where to play a game, because a lot of times you can have literally everything set up, and not having the best spot to do it can ruin it.
If you
Oh
ever
yeah.
try not setting aside a spot and just winging it, then what you'll get is
Yeah,
suddenly there's a lot of background noise you didn't account for. I don't remember
yeah.
this
Or
location being right next to an Air Force base. Who are all these people who just walked in?
yeah.
Why are they day
I didn't.
drinking?
I didn't exactly. I didn't know this house had 6 roommates. I thought it was just 2. Um.
Oh my god, there's a
So
dog.
exactly. If
Well, that's
there's a
always a
dog,
positive, though.
done. No one. No. It's a massive negative. No one will pay attention. It's
Oh,
the
that's true.
worst.
Yeah.
So ideally, no, trust me. During Hurricane Irma, I went to one of my players' house, and she has 2 cats, a dog, and a lot of birds. We got nothing done. Um,
Oh, pretty
so
birdie.
ideally, oh, they're great birds. Ideally, in a perfect world, the best, and I think we can all agree on this, the best setup is a decently sturdy dining room table, either round or like oblong, so like roundish rectangular or oval, with plenty of sturdy chairs that are comfy enough to sit in, that has enough elbow room between the players left and right of them, and an area where the GM can sequester themselves, either at the head of a table or on a smaller table that they attach to it, um, and that generally keeps everyone attentive. So you want to think like a poker table, a place for everything to go and plenty of elbow room so no one bumps into each other, like something that keeps you attentive but is also comfortable enough to sit for multiple hours. That I think is ideal.
Yeah, that's why I
In
tend
Now
to
there,
stay away from couches and whatnot because that's
yes,
that's that's too
I was
comfy.
just gonna mention that. Like with Shadowrun, dude, it was what was it? It was one couch, a love seat, a coffee table, a
One
rolling
person was
chair,
sitting on a stool.
and a recliner. And you were in the recliner,
Yeah, that's right.
dude. And there were people. There was a point at one time where we had so many people that people had to stand or just like sit at a table. Oh, dude, it was
Dude,
Standing
brutal.
room
I
only.
sat on that beanbag stool thing many a
Yeah,
time. Just
and
The deflated
the
beanbag thing.
I remember
Now,
that.
you would think that having your living room full of people around a coffee table, like we made it work, but you know, I
It
had
was
to
not
get
ideal.
I had to get very comfy with the person who sat on that love seat with me because that was my spot, left side of the love seat,
Hmm.
and like we could have been like finger banging each other and no one would know. That's how like wrapped up we were in each other, and it was so comfortable that we'd get sleepy and groggy, and the lighting wasn't good. That's another thing I didn't think about.
Lighting,
Is that
absolutely. That room
yeah,
was so goddamn dark, and
you have to have a like bring lamps in like enough that lights everything up so people can not only see what they're reading on their sheets and illuminate the dice they're rolling, but keep them awake. If it's too dark, they fall asleep. If it's too bright, they get overwhelmed. You got to have a nice balance. Um, and it's pretty difficult to pull off. Like basically, honestly, I've only played in one game where the lighting was adequate, and it's the one I'm playing now. And it's because it's like I have a sun pointed at the table.
Yeah. Another really big thing is as free of distractions as humanly possible. That's
Definitely.
also the big one. So it's got to be quiet.
Things like kitchens, like that's the thing is my little area is right next to a kitchen, and if somebody wanted to get something to eat, it'd be very distracting. But it's also convenient because we can pop over. Someone can work on some food for the table and be like, oh, somebody roll a d20 for me. So that's not too distracting. But things like pets, like like letting people get on their laptops and their phones and stuff like that could be a distraction. But like honestly, the ideal place is a dining room. It's like you want a dining room, and if you don't have that, get a nice big table. And if not, you can go somewhere. Depending on where you are, there are like gaming stores that have rental stuff. I know in Savannah, at the Guild Hall, they rent them out, and it's not too bad. I think it's like $20 for a 5-hour session, and then like $5 for every hour after that.
Hmm.
Something like
If
that.
everybody chips in, yeah,
Col-
it's not bad.
Colleges and
Um,
universities also will a lot of times just let the nerd groups take over a place for a while
and
and just let them do it.
and there were a number of games in the first tabletop game I ever played, or a number of sessions where we played at Denny's at 2 a.m.
Oh yeah, good old Denny's.
Hey, there
Not a
are
great
worse
place to play
places,
it.
but there
No.
are worse places.
But that's the thing is the staff knew us. We bought food. We were not loud or disruptive. And when the trucker crowd came in, we would move back to my place or whatever. And it's a magical thing, tabletopping, but it's very difficult to find. It's like, this is going to be a very apt analogy. It's like sex. It could literally happen anywhere, but if you get crazy with it, you might get poison ivy on your balls.
Wait.
What, you guys have never got poison ivy from tabletopping?
Shit, man. You gotta
Actually,
roll Constitution.
So-
I have gotten poison ivy from tabletopping.
Are you serious?
Okay, so me and my buddy Jason. You guys remember Jason? So it was me, Jason, Josh, Jeff, and Brett. It's like the whole crew, my gaming crew from my high school days. We all went camping and played D&D for 2 days straight in the woods on a picnic table, and it was surprisingly awesome.
Okay.
But what we didn't know is that growing up underneath the picnic table that we had was poison oak.
Okay. How long were you at that picnic table that it had time to grow?
2 days.
No, it was already there. Like we just didn't know. We just thought it was like weeds and shit. But it got all up our legs, our areas, my back. I was covered freaking from my under boobs down in
Yeah.
poison oak. It was awful.
Don't let this dissuade people from tabletopping outside. That's still very fun.
Oh, it is a
That's
lot
the
of fun.
thing is,
Just watch out
in-
for poison oak. They'll get you.
like, especially during the hurricane, during Matthew and Irma, there were times where we're just taking us outside. Like, we need light. There's no light in here, so let's enjoy the fresh air and roll some dice. And you could do it standing with a minor surface. Like, we rolled dice on the hood of a car, and there was a point where it was like, this is just role play right now, so let's step outside. So it can happen anywhere. It just depends on the best place, and the best place is a dining room, table, sturdy chairs, bright lights.
And that is
Avoid-
if you're even going to do it in a physical location, because you can also take this to the internet.
Yep.
There's a lot of great
There
apps
are-
out there, specifically Roll20, which we use all the time. It has
Yeah.
all the pre-built shit in it, like grids and tokens to use as like little miniatures, and you could do the dice rolling on there so everybody can, or even just the GM can see what you're doing. And it supports voice chat, I think. We never
It
use
does.
it.
It does.
It uses Hangouts.
Oh yeah, see, there you go.
Not quite as reliable, but
It is. No, we used it all the time for Latier in the early days.
Yeah.
'Cause whenever my Skype would mess up, we'd switch back and forth. Roll20.net is an amazing tool, very intuitive for players, but on the GM side, it is daunting. It's almost frightening how dense it is. But with a little bit of elbow grease and time, it can be your best friend. I've seen Nick pull off some crazy cool stuff that regular pen and paper and a grid could not achieve. And that also even matters if you're using a grid or not. If you're not, then it's a lot easier.
Because
also,
you're coming to the table, there's like some basic things that you'll probably end up using, like maybe a grid map. Like there's like the mats that you could roll up or fold up or whatever. Mark it with dry erase things.
Let's cover the things you'd need on the physical, and then we'll compare to the things you'd need on the internet.
Sure. Well, we're talking about
S-
grid paper and maps and whatnot. So you have the actual map, and you can use like dry erase markers and stuff to actually draw your map. You could use whatever you want for like an actual representation of like a miniature token. Some people just will straight up put extra dice on there and move
yeah,
those
that's what
around.
I do.
Some people actually have really detailed miniatures that they either buy, pre-painted or do it themselves.
One of the things I will do for 5th ed specifically, here's just a little hot tip for anybody that's running and doesn't have a lot of minis. Um, I have implemented a way of using dice as miniature representations with the abstraction of size and scariness coming into account. And whenever I put a piece on the board, the dice is the size of their hit die. So if a regular run-of-the-mill squirt runt whatever comes out and it's really weak, I'll put a D4, and they're like, "Oh, okay, it's no big deal." But when I put a D8 or a D12, like, "Okay, this guy knows what he's doing." If I put a D12, they run for the fucking hills.
You put a D100 on there, and it's like, uh-oh.
Oh,
And
Trask, no.
one
It
time,
doesn't even get that high.
and one time, I put a D20 down, and it's a good little way to abstract the general size of the thing you're fighting.
Yeah. I will say this. I have personally dealt with a lot of different mapping and stuff like that for combats and things like that. My suggestion is spend the little bit of extra coin that it's going to cost and get the reversible battle map by Chessex because it's just
the Chessex map,
better.
Yeah, it's got both sides. You got squares on one side and then hexes on the other.
Yeah.
What's really good about that is the hexes side is really good for doing like an overworld map. They want to move their pieces, and flipping over is to the squares is really good for combat. It can get a little daunting if you have to switch back and forth in the middle of a game, but it's definitely worth the coin. I think the square one that's about 4 feet by 4 feet is like $50, and then the oblong one, which is like 5 feet by 6 feet, or like 4 feet by 6 feet, is like $80. It's a chunk of change, but tabletop is very front loaded, and it's very front loaded in price. Once you get the stuff you need, you never have to spend another dime.
And that is even if you are going to use grids, because people like me,
right?
You can't see it, but I'm pointing at myself. Like to not use grids and like a more narrative version of it, because I think that's more immersive and fun for me. Narratively and imaginatively, I think it's easy to keep track of everything, and I'm not even talking as just a GM. I'm talking about as a player. I prefer it too. But that's not for everybody, and I know I've gotten flack for that before.
Certain games warrant a grid more so than others. Some games it's ill-advised to do so. 5th edition is lean towards a grid, but you can go either way. Games like Shadowrun and World of Darkness are pretty much made to be thought of.
Yeah, you don't want to use grids for shit like that.
Yeah. Stuff like Stars Without Number, Shadowrun, Pathfinder, you can honestly go either way because it's so insular and rules-based.
Deadlands is good for narrative.
Deadlands, that's another one, yeah. Good for narrative. But
what about
games
Star Wars? I haven't played a lot of the Star Wars tabletop.
Star Wars, because of the nature of how fluid and cinematic the descriptors are, you would restrain yourself tremendously, imaginatively and actual piece-wise, to put it on a grid. That game is the most cinematic and like imaginative joined story experience of any I've ever played, and I hold that it is in the upper echelon of role-playing systems. It's incredible. Just putting that out there to anyone listening, because it is worth the time to play.
Yeah, I want to check out more of it. Starfinder has a weird mix, because if you're not space combat, like just regular combat, you could get away with just doing it narratively. They think they recommend a grid, but you can kind of stay away from it. But when it gets to space combat, I don't know if there's a way to do it without a grid because it involves a lot of facing and maneuvering and
Yeah.
stuff like that through hexes.
You could probably do it with minis at the very least, and you don't have to do a grid. I don't know, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, at that point, you might as well just have a grid.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of materials, the Chessex battle map is what you want. It's the Smith and Wesson of mats. What I've seen done and works very well and is extremely cheap, especially after the holidays, is wrapping paper. The reason why is because it's very cheap, it's disposable, and on the back of it, it has 1 inch square grids.
Yeah.
Oh, that's clever. I didn't know about that.
It is very clever. I have a roll of it. That's actually what I'm going to put my Lich Dungeon on because I don't have enough Chessex battle map for it.
Santa on one side, necromancy on the other.
You're going to want dry erase markers, obviously. You're going to want some permanent markers. And that's even if you're using a grid. If you're not using a grid, you'll want at least 2 character sheets for everybody.
Yeah, print out the character sheets. Find a good one.
Yeah, print them out. Having an app is fine as a backup, but nothing beats a character sheet in front of you. Because it's easiest to pull up and look at. One thing that my players do, and it's super genius, is they'll take their character sheets and they'll erase the things that are frequently removed, like HP or hit dice or expendable stuff, and put it in a plastic sleeve, and then write on it with a dry erase marker and update it with each turn and each round.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It is very brilliant. And
dry erase markers are great.
Oh yeah, get a pack of them. They're cheap, like $5 for a whole rainbow of them.
And while you're getting that pack, then go get one of those big packs, like mechanical pencils or something like that.
Absolutely.
Just to have, because it's always good to have a lot of those.
You're gonna want
cheap.
0.7. Yeah, they're very cheap. 0.75. Honestly, the mechanical pencil running out of lead crisis is not a thing anymore. I have not picked up a mechanical pencil that did not have lead in it since 2007. I don't know what happened. I don't know if Elon Musk invented infinite lead or whatever, but it's awesome. You're also going to want some notebooks or some loose leaf paper, like at Staples or wherever, like actual college rules, simple, 125 sheet books, line paper. They're like 50 cents.
Yeah, those spiral notebooks are so cheap.
Just get a handful of them. And if you're going to have a lot of handouts in your game and you want to get really into it and here's this crumpled note you find, encourage your players to get either paper folders or 3-ring binders. Honestly, in terms of a player expense, that doesn't amount to more than $15, if that. Now, where it gets dicey is...
Are you transitioning dice into dice? Oh, that's what I thought you were going to. Where it gets dicey are the dice.
Where it gets dicey, I'll do that instead because I did not think of that. Where it gets dicey are the dice.
Have
certain
dice.
Games Fantasy Flight games, especially the Warhammer 40k RPGs, you need 2 dice. You need a D10 and a percentile. That's it. For Shadowrun, all you need is a brick of D6s, and that's $10. For D&D, getting a stack of 7 is fine, but if you're playing 5th edition, I highly recommend you get 2 sets. So that you have 2 D20s, 2 D12s, 2 D8s, 2 D10s.
Yeah, and this is pretty much just for the GM. Every player should have their own set of dice, mostly because not only will they like having dice, because who doesn't like rolling dice and having their own set?
Yeah, everybody loves dice.
It'll make sure that people aren't reaching across the table and being like, "Oh, you borrow this," and it takes up a lot of time trying to sort.
We've had to do that so many times playing Shadowrun.
Yeah, it's like, hey, can I borrow your brick because I'm rolling something so crazy?
Yeah, it's like, can I borrow your brick and your brick?
I need 38 D6s.
It may seem like you're getting a little too indulgent, but if you're a wizard or if you're a rogue or you play something that requires a lot of dice, specifically, Or if you're playing something like World of Darkness or Exalted that requires a lot of dice and specific dice from different
A lot of
areas,
the same type of
go to
dice.
Oh yeah.
go to a local game store and just buy individual die. Like if you're going to be a rogue in 5th edition, you're going to want a lot of d6s. So go buy some sneak dice. They're like 30 cents, 40 cents per d6.
With
Probably a
World of
little bit more
Darkness
expensive.
specifically, you can get like packs of D10s. Those just
Yeah,
exist.
10d10s.
So just having an idea as a GM and a player is important, and having like getting a pound of dice and with the explicit intention of here's a fucking d20, stop asking for one to give to your players is not inappropriate at all. Like just here you go, here's a public stuff, take what you need, I don't care. It's a pound of dice, they're shit dice. A pound of dice like what, $20? It's not much.
Yeah, it's 20. You can get them for really good prices at like conventions and stuff like that. So.
Amazon's got sales all the time. I saw it as low as 11 one time.
Oh wow.
Now, what I was actually going to say, besides the dice, because that's, again, once you buy dice, you shouldn't need more dice. Like, especially if you put a bit of, like, forward thought into it.
I need my fix, man. More dice, more rolling.
Now, I buy dice all the fucking time.
I do too,
like,
dude. We have so many dice, it's
everybody
ridiculous.
loves dice, man. Ugh, it's great. And then, obviously, you have to follow the tradition and put all of your dice in a Crown Royal bag.
Oh yeah,
Obviously.
of course. It's required.
As is tradition.
Go to your local liquor store, buy Crown Royal, throw whatever's in there away, or just chug it. Chug the whole thing, and then you got
Throw it
a
away.
bag.
Yeah, return the Crown Royal and keep the bag. There you go.
Dropkick whoever's behind the counter. Run away.
Faster.
If you are playing online, this might not be something you need to do. Like if you're online, you don't need to buy dice or all this other stuff.
The dice are built in.
person,
If you need to roll 400 d6, you got it. Just hit a button.
I recommend that you buy at least one copy of the book and whatever correlative books to your campaign that you're doing. In terms of stuff like D&D, you absolutely have to have the Dungeon Master's Guide. There is no way around it.
Yeah,
now,
I'd get a book no matter what, even if you have like bought a PDF copy or something like that, then still have that physical book, because being able to just instantly turn a bunch of pages and because you could feel exactly where you need to go, not only saves a lot of time, but it just feels good to have a book in your hands.
It feels better.
Now, games like Pathfinder or Dark Heresy or Edge of the Empire, the Star Wars RPG, they have their pseudo, enough of a Dungeon Master's flavor guide in it that you don't really need to get anything else. But that's really that's a game for game basis. D&D, I from what I've seen, is the only one that does a real honest to God. This book is just for who's running the game. Because in Shadowrun they have shitloads of books, but they're all like expansions. They're all like, here's more tech, here's more weapons, here's more gear. In Pathfinder, it's extra classes and whatever else we could, expunge from your wallet.
Yeah, it's more. Whereas the D&D Dungeon Master's Guide is, hey, here's some new rules that aren't even like written in the player's handbook. Here are some very important magical items that you'll need to know.
And one thing I highly recommend, and I honestly never thought I would buy something like this, especially something so expensive. Like, if there's a book you're kind of concerned about getting, or maybe you might need, or even if you're like near a bookstore that sells these books, or if you're in a game store, just grab whatever book is the latest expansion, just brisk through it if you're the GM, and just see if anything pops out at you. Because I remember when Volo's Guide to Monsters came out, I was like, oh, hey, that came out, and it had come out like a month ago, or a month before, and I whisked through it, and I saw that it touched on gnolls, and it had all this lore, and all this plot, and all these hooks, and all this stuff, and I was kicking myself because I had run gnoll-heavy plot, and I should have looked at it beforehand, and I said, I'm not going to make this mistake again, I'm buying this right now. And by buy, I mean illegally downloaded. Which, don't do that. Support local business.
Or drive-through RPG.com.
Yeah. or support big business at drivethrurpg.com. um, and with drivethrurpg.com, it's pretty easy to share with the players you're in. Don't get in the business of torrenting it, because if someone gets caught torrenting their copy, that account could shut the hell down. So it's okay to share with your group if you're online, but don't try and be that guy like, put it on Demonoid. No, don't, because it's got your fucking name on it. It's got in the bottom right and your account number on every page.
Yeah, don't be doofy.
Yeah, don't come on.
One thing that I personally will always suggest to both new DMs and people that have been running forever, a lot of people don't like these, but if you're running in person or even online, either buy or make a GM screen. Now, as far as buying one, you can go out and to a local game store and say, I need one for Mage the Awakening, but I also need one for Shadowrun, and I also need one for... You can get a DM screen for relatively cheap. They're like $5 or $10, I think, max.
Yeah.
But it's got like a quick reference guide.
Which was the Shadowrun one? The one you sent me. Which was that one?
The Shadowrun one, it came with the book.
Oh. I was going to say, because that one was incredible.
Okay,
anyway,
hold on, calm down. The ones I've seen haven't been like $5 or $10. They've been more like $20 each.
Yeah, that's why I was asking, because like that Shadowrun, like for the art alone, was worth way more.
Oh, fair enough. At any rate,
it can get pricey.
It's got quick references. That's the big thing.
Crucial references you're gonna need.
It tells you specific
quick
rules.
tables.
Tables are the big thing, right on the screen, and so you can make quick dice rolls if you need it, or look up something without having to move through 300 pages of the actual rule book.
Yeah. Now you can go online, find PDF pictures of different screens that you can just print it out and put on some cardboard with a bit of spray paint on the back. It doesn't matter how you do it, but get at least a DM screen that you can use, because one, it hides your rolls. Two, it's got all of the quick reference material that you're going to need as a GM. And if you think for 1 second you're going to be able to memorize that, you are wrong. You're wrong. Don't try to memorize it. You won't do it.
What was the rule set in Shadowrun that I had a book, like an actual tab in my book that had a frowny, angry face on it because I was sick of looking up the rules and I couldn't remember it?
It was...
Was that Technomancy?
What was it? Yeah, it was Technomancy.
Yeah, it was Technomancy.
I'm like, is it Pyromancy? Yeah, it was Technomancy. It was Sprites. It was just
Sprites,
the
specifically
Sprite set.
Sprites, because each of them did
Sprites.
something different. They had their own rules, and I got so mad I just drew the thing on the book.
Each single one had its own character sheet, and Shadowrun character sheets are intense.
Oh, dude, they are nuts. Like once you get a character made for Shadowrun, everything works together like a well-oiled machine. But
you're good for a nap, that's what you do after that.
6 hours was like the bare minimum.
Dude, we sat down to make 5th ed character sheets, and it was like we started like 5 or 6 in the afternoon and evening, and we were done by like 1 in the morning or some shit like that.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And what happened is there was one person working on something, and they'd figure something out, and they'd be like, "Oh, here's what I did," and then somebody showed up, like you got off at like a 10 or whatever, and it was like, "Oh Christ, we gotta help!" Oh my God, it was like running a marathon, and like several people started halfway through, like, "Hey, what are we doing?" It's like we're killing ourselves.
Yeah, well, to be fair, we also were all learning the system for the first time, including me, who was trying to run people through making a character that I hadn't done yet.
Yep. Now, to touch on a DM screen, it is definitely ideal to get a quick reference. But one of the things we'll talk about when we discuss actually preparing the game once you have all the materials is whether or not you want to hide your dice. 9 times out of 10, you want to hide your dice. And the only reason I say that is because I run a very, very, very open, the dice do what they will, and if I crit you, you know, like the dice roll, like I don't fudge these dice. and I always roll in front of my players every single time. Every single time. And it takes a bit of the autonomy out of my hands, but it also lightens the workload for me. So that's, again, we'll talk about when that's appropriate. 9 times out of 10, it's not. Get a DM screen, get a quick reference, because it saves lives, especially in the 40K RPGs where it's like, look at all these critical effect tables and scatter charts and ammunition settings. It's fucking
And perils of the warp.
and perils of the warp. God damn.
Yeah, get a DM screen, a good one, if you can. If not, also, caveat, you can buy or have custom-made DM screens that have, like, dice rolling towers, and they're made of wood, and they're really nice, and they're pretty, and they got places for all that stuff. Those are cool, too, but that's like, I've
honestly,
been DMing
really
for 20 years.
They're not that hard to make.
They aren't.
Like,
But you do bring up a good point that I just thought about, and it's shit to roll your dice in. A big enough table will do it, but if you do not want your players throwing those dice,
ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is the premiere. No, everybody. I know I've been talking a lot, but I need to tell. Ladies and gentlemen that live in America, specifically within 5 miles of a Taco Bell, the best item, the best tool you will ever have to roll dice in, or to have pencils or equipment or pieces of paper or whatever, go to your local Taco Bell. Order some food, just food that you will probably eat, not will throw away immediately like the Crown Royal.
Probably.
And order in. Do not order to go. If they hand you a black sunken tray with food in it, walk out the door. Just take that food and walk out the door. Now, I'm not condoning torrenting download files and sharing illegally and not supporting local business, but I am absolutely supporting you to steal these trays from Taco Bell, because they are the best goddamn dice rollers in the world.
Absolutely. Like, we used these dice rolling trays that we kifed from a local Taco Bell.
And
we used them for so
the
long.
Way it happened,
like,
I didn't even do it intentionally. I ordered my food to go. They gave me a tray, and I said, I gotta go. And I just took it with me. And I was like, fuck it. Like 5 days, I was like, fuck it. I rolled my dice in it. I was like, this feels amazing.
It's great.
I feel like I'm riding a wild Italian stallion.
Now,
or you can go a dice tower that doesn't involve theft, but that's a different story.
You can just make one of those out of cardboard if you're really feeling froggy. But yeah, like, it was such a big deal with that tray that, like, when I left Savannah to move to Atlanta, I gave my tray to Jesse as it was like a symbol almost. It was like, so get one if you can. If you can't, I'm sorry for you, but if you can, do so.
If you can't, get a dice tower. Dice towers are small little wooden structures that have a port on the top and sometimes 2, most times 3 little ramps inside it so that it scrambles the dice, and a little pool at the bottom to catch them. So that it scrambles the dice, rolls it down, and it lands. It makes a nice little sounds. Very satisfying.
We don't usually talk about war games, but if you're playing like a tabletop Warhammer or Warhammer 40,000 with all the miniatures and 10,000 D6s, then that is absolutely useful.
And definitely in stuff like Shadowrun or Exalted or Edge of the Empire, the Star Wars RPG, where a lot of dice get put into the pool. Because putting it on the table, they can scatter and it gets all over the place, and you just want to be able to consolidate them and count them. These little dice towers are not very big. They're like about the width and a little bit taller than the height of a Coke can, and just they can sit right next to your dice and way out of the way. And if you had a good location, and if you found a dining room-esque area, it fits in and is unobtrusive, and that also can fit in between a homemade DM screen, because you could put the flanks of a cardboard cutout with quick chart tables on either side of it and just roll your dice right down in it so that it rolls back at you.
Yeah.
Definitely something I've seen done a lot.
Yeah. That being said, if you don't want to kite from your local Taco Bell and you don't want to either build and or buy a dice tower, which takes either time or money or both, you can just go online and just Google black plastic trays. You could find them for about $1.50 to $2.50, and it will do the same thing. But yeah, you need a tray. You really do.
We could have led with that.
What also works, I've seen people use it, is flat bottom Tupperware, because it's not too big, not too obtrusive, and you just roll in it, you can see through it. Yeah, good eyes on it. There's all kinds of, like, that's the thing is, same with playing, rolling can happen anywhere. Like,
Tricks to the trade, though.
So, yeah. Like,
oh shit, that's like when we played,
just...
when we were playing World of Darkness, and just had like the little plastic containers that you could just carry around, and then just jiggle your hand, and then it would all self-contain roll.
Yeah.
That,
you know when you go to like a grocery store, and you take a quarter and you drop it like 2 quarters into that little thing that gives you that shitty plastic ring, or like the tiny little goop thing, those little plastic cup things with lid.
Those little capsules, the little pop
that's right.
capsules.
Much like with the Crown Royale, the container is the important part.
Yeah. And they're only like 50 cents.
Fake tattoo or whatever.
Yeah, they're 50 cents.
And yeah,
too,
that was something that a lot of people did for what's called a parlor LARP, where it's basically you get actually dressed up as your character and you talk whatever. But that's a whole different.
That's a whole other ball of wax.
That's a whole different bag of dicks. And just putting a single die in there and like flipping it and popping it down is a good way to get a roll. But that's a topic for a later day. Honestly, I feel like we've talked about all the stuff you'll possibly need in real space. With online, it's Roll20. Roll20. Get the appropriate PDFs on RPG.net and share them, and only with your group so that you don't get tracked down.
So now that we're kind of in the digital, there is something that I thought of that I want to talk about a little bit, and it's kind of a transition, a merging of the two concepts, because I remembered when I ran Shadowrun and Pathfinder, there was one item that I always had, and that was an HDMI cable that attached to a big TV, so I could hook up my laptop to that and display cool pictures, or like, here's what you see kind of things, or even the map if I'm feeling like just a vague map that you don't interact directly with.
Yeah, I tried that with the Star Wars RPG, and I had a porn tab open, and no one told me until the game was over, so I am no longer ever doing that ever.
Close your porn tabs, people.
That was a great intro with the music and the John Williams and all that.
It was a great intro. It was the best ever, but none of you told me that I had some very, very questionable hentai open.
Okay, I didn't notice that until about 5 minutes before you noticed that. And I was like, I don't want to interrupt the game for this, just in case nobody else noticed. And then you were like, nobody fucking told me!
No one, everyone noticed, and no one told me.
I was like, what is hentai? Oh, well, I'm going to go ahead and just ignore that, because...
Insert Star Wars theme.
Yep.
That being said, there are also online tutorials and stuff you can do. If you want to really go like balls to the wall heavy with it, you can get a flat panel display monitor and hook a computer up to it and tip that thing on its back down inside of a table with a piece of glass over the top of it. Display maps like that. Like if you want to go nuts, you can go nuts. That's the way to do it.
There's some crazy shit.
Like that's the thing is you could literally throw dice in an elevator with a dude who has a character sheet on an index card, or you can fabricate all of Waterdeep to scale to the minis in your garage. Like
foam, everything.
This is one of the greatest hobbies that there are ever, because it is so subjective.
You can pretty much do as much or as little as you want.
It gives you pretty much perfect return, equal to what you put in, and no more and no less. And a lot of games, honestly, the limitation is which game, what idea, what character. Like it's fun.
Yeah, you could go
I'm so upset
completely crazy.
I was doing this earlier. I started doing this when I was 21, Damn it! It's not enough time.
I think that's when I started too.
Yeah.
Uh,
I started playing when I was 13.
Yep.
oh wow. Oh, and speaking of the players, part of setting it up is choosing
Yeah. That
who you need to put into your game or who would be appropriate for the game because
is a pretty touchy subject,
it is a
especially
little
if you don't.
touchy, but the part of finding who you're trying to get in your game is presenting them with what the game is going to be. If you
Mhm.
know there's some player who wants like a really like grindy, like we go into a dungeon, we figure
Yeah.
out puzzles, we disable traps, we kill monsters, we get loot, and you want to run a horror themed game that is heavy on investigation and character based roleplay, you got to bring that up. But and that player probably will just be like, "I'm not very interested in doing that," which is fine.
Yeah.
Or or there'll be a compromise and they'll say, "Well, I'd like to stick around," and that's something you should respect. You should throw them a bone every time, as you should with every player. But that's the nature of it. Is the dungeon master's role is one of service when it really truly comes down to it.
Yes.
You are ensuring that they are having fun, but not at your expense. You've got to exert some effort, but it's for them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like,
My motto is the GM is a player too.
Yeah.
yep,
My
the
my
GM has to have
golden
fun too.
my golden rule in that respect is that you are the painter for the canvas, but everything that happens is based on the players. Your
Well,
responsibility
you may be
is to
the
them
painter, but they
first.
are.
Yeah. It
Um,
should never be the DM versus the players, and it should never be the players suffer for the DM's enjoyment. Unless,
so here are some things to avoid, and then we'll say some things to look out for in a player. But for honestly, the only thing you need in a player is willingness to have fun and a decent imagination, which just about everybody has. But the hard and fast rules of the things to look out for. You want to look out for somebody who presents a character that is way overpowered or has only ever played high intensity games and doesn't seem like they can play high intensity games, especially if you have new players or it's not a high intensity game. Being completely honest, 5th edition is not an intense game. It is the most accessible D&D has ever been. Period. Ever.
yeah,
It doesn't get easier, it doesn't get more friendly, it doesn't get less lethal than 5th edition D&D. That doesn't make it bad. In fact, it makes it pretty great.
yeah, it's great. I love it personally.
It's one of the best systems there are. If you have somebody who only knows AD&D or like hasn't played since like they were buddies with Gygax, then maybe talk to them about what it's turned into. Or if you have someone who has never played who's only ever played base 20 systems and you want to do something a little outside the box like, a World of Darkness Splat or Exalted or Seven Seas or whatever, you got to understand that things will be different. Now, that has to do with player experience. What's very important as well is player relationships.
Yes.
And this is where it gets a little touchy.
I actually have something that I post whenever I do online games and something that I print out for all of my players to read through. I like for them to sign it or at the very least let me know that they have read it. It's a disclaimer and open door policy as well as a player expectations and general guidelines. These are the thing. This document is important because it lets your players, perspective or otherwise, know what your intent is, and it lets them know what you are expecting of them and what you are willing to give in return for that expectation being met. It is one of the best things you
reason
can
that
do.
is very important to set expectations is if you know somebody, let's say this is your childhood friend and you've been tabletopping and you say I want to run a game and they've never done it and they want to play it, but they don't really like the rules. And, you've always got them out of a jam. Their expectations might be that they won't have to do much and you'll be very forgiving. If that's not your expectation, especially if you're playing a high-intensity game, you're going to have to set them straight. Because some people bank on, and it's not something I don't think anyone ever really does maliciously, though there are a few people. So Nick and I have certainly seen them, Jesus Christ.
I've seen a couple too.
The people will think that you'll play favorites, especially if it's like your significant other or a very close friend or someone that's very new. That can get a little hairy. What's even hairier is when you have a couple playing in your game that maybe doesn't have a lot of experience, or it's not the best relationship in the world, but we're not here to judge. They can steal the spotlight from other players who are just trying to have a good time, or they both gang up on you, and it just tread lightly. Whenever they're like dating, whenever two players are banging, and mostly when the GM is involved, tread very lightly. Very lightly, and just be very decisive and very direct. But as Xander said, having an understanding and an open door policy and speaking to your players and them to you on a private, even professional level just ensures that there's no misunderstanding, that everything goes very smoothly.
Yeah. Like
that's what to look out for.
Yeah, that's what to look out for. One of the things that I found is good is to set a base minimum, and then build on that when you speak to your players. For example, one of the things in my disclaimer policy is, and I will read this verbatim, I expect all of my players to be mature about the elements of gameplay and sensitivities of others. Inappropriate jokes, harassment, racism, sexism, or cultural insensitivity will not be tolerated. Anyone, to include myself, will be held to these standards. And then in bold red letters it says, remember that what you may think is funny may not be funny to others. Think before you speak. An immediate apology will likely be accepted, but multiple violations will result in you being expelled from the game. You have to be firm with these things. If you're not, your players will run all over you. You gotta have the iron fist with that.
That's true, but conversely, the way I choose players for a game is if that's pretty much almost exclusively people I already know, or who I would already know would be cool with certain aspects of things, like whether it's any of the isms Xander just mentioned, or if it's something like not graphic violence. I mean, excessive violence, I guess. You can't see it physically. That's weird. Or
that's a
good way I gauge it is if because it's one of my standing rules for my online game is if you're in the game, you don't have to roll the actual on the in-game app. If you want to roll physical dice, then you can roll it and tell me what you got, and I will trust you. Because if I can trust that you're not going to cheat at make-believe, then you're more than welcome in my game.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to measure it out. And now that I think about it, the three of us all have slightly different recruiting methods. And they're not, like, too far off. Like, Xander is definitely one to go, all right, I need 80 people for this game. Get your asses in here.
Oh, my God. The last time I was trying to recruit, it was like, I'm like, okay, so I've got a game I'm starting up. Let's gather all 29 of these people.
I remember that game. Oh. 29 people were recruited, 11 showed up, 11 played.
Nick's is very much, I have an idea for a game. I could see X, Y, and Z playing in this game. Let's see if we can get one or two solid people to jump in with us. And mine, with Streets, with Shadowrun Streets, and then Heroes Under Heaven, my Tales of the Orient setting, I honestly had the idea of the players first. And it was, what do we want to play? And it's kind of to my detriment because I have had a spare slot in my party for, God, I don't even know how long. I started out with 4, lost 1, gained 1, and then lost 1. So now I'm down to 3. And honestly, I'm too picky. Like, there's this very unique dynamic, and I would upset it, and so it's sometimes you don't have enough players for the thing you want, because sometimes the thing you want only exists in the minds and the desires of like your players. As I mentioned, I think it was 2 podcasts ago, my game features the epitome of violence and sexual content, and also the co-joining of that of sexual assault. That is a very, very touchy subject. Extreme.
Oh yes.
But I'm very, very, very familiar with my players, as they me, as I them. And this isn't something that's just wantonly people going around and raping each other, but it's like, this is a dark thing. It's like Game of Thrones. It's like, it had that for a little bit, but it hasn't had it in seasons or whatever. But that's not something I can just say. If somebody's new to D&D and like, hey, what's this role playing stuff about? I'm like, yeah, it's about like, it's a dating sim and there's like sexual violence and stuff in this game. They're like, what the fuck? No. So some content can just exclude players just at the door.
Oh yeah.
Like this game, I would never ask Nick to be in this game. Even if it was like, Nick, I'll pay you, I know he wouldn't have fun because the content doesn't agree with him.
That's right.
Because
that's too much
Nick
for me.
doesn't have sexual content. And yeah, exactly, and that's okay. Like something, and even if it doesn't have a particular aspect or it's removed, they still might not enjoy it. I know for my players, one of my favorite things is intrigue and like political backstabbery. And that's not like a content like safety warning, oh my god, but it's the general theme. They don't really go for that. That's not their shtick. And so that's not what I play to. But if you have a bunch of players who want, element X and you expect to have element Y, you gotta either make a compromise or find new players. And sometimes finding new players is not always a solution, or is not an option.
And if you
And
are
so,
selecting players, and part of this, you factor this as like between personalities and like preferences and whatnot, but the amount of players you are willing to run for. My ideal is usually
that's also,
about
yeah.
4 to 5 people in a particular game, which kind of leads to a lot of my games having waiting lists to get in, but that's a different thing. And it's if you go beyond whatever you are comfortable with, then it can, or if the players are particularly spotlight heavy, like they want a lot of attention and all of them want that, then it could really like stress you out and like tax you mentally. Like with the Shadowrun game, the one I tried most recently, it was, I had 6 people in that, and all of them were really like, I want to be actively a part of every situation, which got so overwhelming I actually had to cancel the game.
When was this?
That was when I was trying to run Shadowrun ZX Advent.
Oh,
the tail end one in 2099 when it started in space because it was just crazy at that point.
Because why not?
Yeah.
Hey, man, in Blade Runner 2049, they already made it to Pluto in terms of harvesting colonies. So if they can do it, starting in space in 2099, sounds like a breeze.
Yeah, true. You were gonna say something a second ago.
Who, me?
Which one?
Yeah, Jesse.
Well, I was gonna say that like the player size is very important to your own style as well. And when it comes to people, like much in the same way international airlines will charge very large people for multiple seats, so should you two consider having someone with a very large ego or a very bombastic personality as 2 players. Not because they can like handle the stats of it or whatever, but because that's just enough in the room. And to the same effect, if someone is, so I'll use my players for example. I have one who's been playing, who basically played consistently in AD&D, and has only ever played one game, or one game since, and it's in my game. I have a longtime player who has been playing games consistently, but not so much D&D, and I had a new player. This new player doesn't want the spotlight, very rarely, if ever. Totally content to sit back and watch everything, loves every second of it. She's an anomaly. and then the one from AD&D who sharpened her teeth on, the THACO system is
The
fine.
door can kill
Doesn't
you.
really need this. Yeah, it doesn't. Where a rock can fall and snap your spine. Doesn't need the spotlight that much. About the same as a regular player. And the one that's been playing consistently, every game needs a big thing to happen. They need it. If that doesn't happen, they feel like left out. And so I treat one of those players as two players, and that's probably partially the reason why I haven't gotten a fourth, because there are not egos at the table, but there are demands for attention. And I think that was what happened with Nick's game, was just everybody needed attention. And with 6 people, like 6 is a lot for any game.
Yeah, 6 is a lot, just no matter what.
And whereas Nick's range would be like 4 to like 6 max, my range would be like 1 to 4 max. Like my max is 4. Xander, on the other hand, has to have at least 10 players for it to be good enough.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
My range is entirely based on the system and the setting and all that jazz. My ideal is, if it's D20, Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, that stuff, the 4-person party is the best for me. If it's something like Shadowrun, I prefer to go 3 or 4, maybe 5 if it's but for something like World of Darkness, man, you could throw 7 people at me and it's gonna work. So
yeah,
it's all based on the setting, but each DM has their own style, and my style is very magic heavy, lots of cool powers, all kinds of stuff, lots of loot, plenty of combat, plenty of like fun,
and
all that stuff. And some people are more reserved about it. So it just depends.
I don't think it's so much has to do with the content you run, but the presence you have in a room. If you find yourself being, soft-spoken and reserved a bit, maybe having 8 people in your game is not a good idea. Though, if you have a bunch of close friends that know you and you can communicate with clearly, basically, if you think you can tell everyone in the room no and be stern about it, then you can handle that many people. If 4 people asking you a question at the same time overwhelms you, notch it down to 3. If 3 is too much, notch it down to 2. I mean, I've run games like again, my most successful GMing moment ever was a one-on-one game, and it's it just depends. But typically 2 to 4 is the magic number. That's like 2 is a little low. 4 is actually 3 to 4 is the sweet spot, like right in there.
Yeah. Most role-playing games, on the whole, are built with the expectation that it's gonna be 3 to 4, maybe 5.
I think 3 to
just based
5
on
is the
dynamics.
average range for.
Yeah.
I know that Curse of Strahd actually demands you have 4. It's 4 to 6. That's what I got into now. By the way, Curse of Strahd is great.
We'll check it out.
And then that's module or no module. That's another very important thing.
Oh yeah. Next topic. Nice segue there.
So you have all the gear, you have the players you want, and if you pick a module, the whole like choosing themes and explicit content is really easy if it's a module. Like if you have people that read the back of a module, and a module is a pre-written story that has rules and guidelines specifically for the dungeon masters to supplement the books they already have on this guided adventure. A lot of times they're railroaded, but I've found that more often than not they're open world. Curse of Strahd is actually incredibly open world. Like I've been shocked by it, honestly. Yeah, like it's wild. It's wild. I want to pick it apart, but I'm a player. But anyway.
Well, these modules can also be, of course, things like entire adventure paths or even entire campaigns in one book.
Mm-hmm.
where it's supposed to take you from like level 1 to, I don't know, it's arbitrarily 15, and once you get to the
Yep.
end of that book there, level 15, the story has concluded
Yep.
and
I know
start
that.
something new.
I know the Curse of Strahd goes from level 1 to 10, but the Rise of Tiamat and the Red Dragon arc goes from 1 to 8, and then from 9 to 15. And that content is awesome. But the way to see if everyone is totally into the content is like have them read the blurb on the back, or have them read a review, and if they go hell and fuck yes, then they're down. You don't really need to agree on anything else, and if the system is one that you all know and are familiar with, strap in, run it.
Yeah. Totally.
I would actually, just as a quick side note, I would not recommend running any kind of like convention like module books.
Oh yeah,
because
God,
those
no.
are made to sit down with people for 2 hours that you're never going to see again, and it's
Yep.
very railroady, and there's
And
no
no
wiggle
roleplay.
room. Yeah, no role play, no wiggle room.
So the thing you want to look out for is it's called the Adventures League in 5th edition. If all you want is just a bunch of random strangers sitting down and having a good hoot and hollering time, drinking beer, rolling dice, that's fine. But this is not an intimate like character arc. It's just kill shit, get loot.
Yep.
You may as well be playing Diablo. But Diablo is probably better than 5th edition Adventures League. Now, if you can't find a game or you want to like recruit people, local game stores most time have these convention style games running, and so you can like hop in, see, maybe jump in for a game and see like, hey, I want to run a more serious game. What do you want to do? So
I know
that's a good thing.
I know a lot of them also have like just straight post boards where you can a tavern. You could just say, "Hey, I'm looking for these players for this concept. Who wants in? Call this number or email me or whatever."
Put on a bathroom stall.
Interviews are important.
Call Dragon Slayer 99 for a good time.
Yeah, for a good time. Called Thomas McTexas.
And then they show up. They're like grabbing their junk. Like, all right, let's see it. Like, do you have your dice? Like, what? And then 4 hours later, like, that was awesome. Yeah, I said a good time. But it comes
I think that was an
down
episode
to,
of the IT Crowd.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
I was referencing a College Humor comic.
Yeah.
The way to decide, honestly, is up to you. And by up to you, not meaning like the general person, but you specifically, is what you're prepared to do. For me, it is way easier, and I think I speak for the three of us here, but I do not speak for all the GMs I know. For me, if I have the freedom to make up whatever the hell I need in terms of like characters and loot and path and progression and attitude and cities and stuff like that, with like a general overarching, like somebody described Waterdeep to me and I'm like, all right, that's cool, I'm going to run shit in there, I don't need anything else. Just a general guideline. All right, who's in charge? Who's the mayor? All right, got it. I don't need anything else. I'll fill it up. Where some people want to sculpt the cup themselves and fill it with this predetermined drink.
Like me.
All I need is
I want to make the world. I want to put things in it, and I want to do the whole shebang.
Yeah. Now, that being said, there is a perfectly reasonable middle ground. If you have the idea for the campaign, like you know what you want to do as far as the missions, like there's an evil lich that you have to go and destroy. There, level 20, all that stuff. That's all.
Hey, that's my
good.
campaign. Are you making fun of my shit? I'm gonna whoop your ass.
No, it's
that's
just
exactly
a great example.
Campaign.
So anyway,
right, it is.
There are also supplement books you can buy that are specifically there's no storyline to it at all. It's just a campaign setting. It's got important NPCs, a map, the world, all the cities, maps of the cities and stuff like that. Like you don't have to create the world if you have the idea for the game. And adversely, so yeah, that's a good middle ground.
For my game, Heroes Under Heaven, is I started originally running it in Pathfinder, and in Pathfinder there's called the Dragon Gazetteer, and it very simply is this Asian culture land thing, and it lists off, it has this big gorgeous map, and a list of about 20 different countries that make up this giant mass of land. And it gives what the alignment is, what the ruler is, the general religion, and maybe 3/4 of a page of content about the country. That's it. And for me, that's all I need. All I need to go, and when they say, and I'm running an open world game, pretty strictly 100%. If they say, we want to go to this place, I look at it and go, okay, lawful, neutral, samurai, elves, okay, got it, boom, done. Let's do this. Let's rock and roll. All right, there's a guy named Yoshinori Kaido, and he's a famous swordsman, and he greets you on the trail, and he's an elf. That's it. Like that, that's what I need. And if that kind of improv like intimidates you, and like having specific details and like dungeons planned out and character stat blocks and all that is something you need, stick with a module. Like
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with running a module.
Those
especially
things
if
make
you're a
money
newbie.
for a reason.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And
I would suggest if you've never played or DM'd before, my first suggestion be playing a game. Just run down to your local game store, play in a game, do it once or twice. Make sure you have the understanding. Then step 2, read all the books. Just read them.
it.
all
Just
of them.
read the shit out of it. Like
and
that's
then
one thing that
run a
needs
mod.
to be said. It's just you gotta read. You've got to read. And
If you don't like reading,
honestly,
don't play D&D.
There are a lot of free like one shots or like quick adventure paths that you could find online.
yeah, like
Oh, yeah.
Shadowrun's food fight is one. It's actually very common to run the Murder House dungeon that's in Curse of Strahd as like a little event because it's just a it's a large-ish dungeon that you could do in about 1 or 2 sessions. But I think that's something we kind of forgot to mention in our notes earlier was reading, and that's something I've seen. I have one of my players actually has all these creative ideas and just has this deep desire, but just can't doesn't want to read. And it's not that like it's not they think they can do it. It's just they can't bring themselves to read because doesn't bring them anything. What I recommend for that is read a book, like read a setting book that you want to, not that you have to. And then after you read a like minor setting thing, like if you want to run D&D, grab a Salvatore book that does not involve Driss. That's not a Mary Sue thing. I'm not saying they're bad. Just pick something else. And like get into it, like that. This really cool. Like Shadowrun's got a bunch of fiction. Warhammer 40K, for Jesus Christ, has a lot of books.
Yeah, that's
D&D has a lot of
easily a whole bookshelf by itself. Just that one.
Oh yeah,
set.
yeah, exactly. And if it immediately jones with you and you think like, oh, this is cool, I like these characters, start reading some rules and go through the attribute section or the combat section and then think, oh, how did this character, if this fight scene I read in this book that I really like went, what weapon would they have? How would they do this? And then make the reading an actual exercise in imagination. Because rote memorization is not how you win this battle with the book.
You're not trying to get a doctorate.
If you imagine cool things, yeah, you're not trying to get a PhD in Wizards of the Coast. Like if you read, so if you read the whole book in order or the player's handbook, and you see, you read the fighter thing that, and the battle master fighter has a thing that gives them an attack that has extra reach, so they get reach for a turn. And you go, okay, that's neat, and you just kind of have that floating around. And then you make it to the equipment section, and you see a whip has reach, and you go, oh, that would probably go really well with this thing here. Go back, read it, just flow through the book, see how this would make sense, and think like, oh, what kind of guy would have a whip that does this? Like, just imagine that, and then go back to where you were and continue reading. Just like let the book take you where it wants to go, because I guarantee you'll go, what the fuck is a bugbear? And then you'll want to look at it.
Yeah, follow your
And then
interests and follow your curiosity.
And eventually your curiosity, hopefully your curiosity will never be sated, but it will take you through the book enough that you know what the hell you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's like it's such a gratifying thing, because like when people ask what the fuck I do with my time, I'm like, well, now I play Destiny is what I do, but like I'll just sit and read. I play too much. I just sit and read books Like, I'll even download or buy new ones that I've never played or will ever play, and just read them because they're just fascinating, and it compares notes, and I'm like, oh, this is cool, or just to get ideas, and because it is an exercise in imagination and not so much like rote memorization. Like, you will hate DMing if you try and memorize everything.
Yeah, no, there's just not enough brain cells to do that. Now, I will say this as a caveat to all of that. The first thing as a prospective DM you should do is take that idea that you have as, like, I want to run a cyberpunk futuristic thing. Look for a setting and a system that joneses well with that. Don't try to shoehorn an idea into a system or setting that you are not familiar with. Find the system after you have the idea. It'll make things so much easier, and you'll want to read about it. It's like, oh, this is so cool, freaking jetpacks for legs. Yeah, but if you're reading a D&D book, you're not going to find stuff like that.
Or you can not do any of what they just said and do what I did, which is not read until you're like, oh, wait, there's an entire part of the setting that I missed. Maybe I should learn the rules to this game I've been running for 5 months.
Are you talking about 5th Ed?
Like any system I've ran? Talk about Shadowrun?
Yeah.
I didn't even know what the setting was for like half a year.
For 2 years.
And then I realized that Seattle is actually on a coast.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing is, prospective dungeon masters are going to realize that there are alternative rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide. One of them being for firearms and explosives, and they range from flintlock pistols to motherfucking laser guns. And if that, like, really tickles your fancy and that's the thing you focus on, maybe move on to another system. Like, and maybe a homebrew is what's good. Like, check and see if there are rules specifically for it. I know, God, what was it?
I wouldn't recommend homebrew without, like, having some games under your belt. GM-wise, though.
So, I never recommend homebrews as the first thing, but if you find enough reviews, and this is the only reason I bring this up is because it is very well made and made by a lot of people. Starbound is 5th edition in space. It's basically the Starfinder to Pathfinder. And full homebrew systems can be dicey. But if certain elements are more interesting to you, like, maybe look at something else. Like, if you like the idea of vampires in your game and Curse of Strahd is really cool and you read it, top to bottom, and you're like, I want more politics and more intrigue, maybe get into World of Darkness. Maybe get into Vampire the Masquerade.
Yeah. Now, as a final note to this, as a final note to all of the prospective GMs out there, people that have been running for a long time, will always tell you the first, last, and only rule that you ever should memorize is that everything to do with the game you are running is a suggestion. You can alter things to set your setting. It's not a hard line. Use it as a guide. Use it as a tool to take yourself there. But don't limit yourself by that. Let the creativeness go, and you will have a lot more fun with it as both a GM, and when GMs do that, the players have more fun too. So just be creative and don't let it hold you back either.
Yeah, it's a game. Relax, have some fun. You're hanging out with friends, and let it be that. And with that, that will do it for our episode tonight. Once again, I'm Nick Logie, and we also have, of course, Jesse Chromians and Xander Nolan.
Guys, goodbye.
Later,
We'll
guys.
See you next time.